When you think of gangster movies, what comes to mind? Maybe The Godfather, Scarface. What about Goodfellas? Well, what if I told you that there was a movie in the gangster genre that stands out from its peers? A movie so unique that it's able to stand out amongst its contemporaries. Well, that movie is Takeshi Kitano's 1993 film, Sonatine. Sonatine was the final film in Takeshi Kitano's Yakuza trilogy, following from its first two predecessors, 1989's Violent Cop and 1990's Boiling Point. It would end up becoming the turning point to Kitano's international recognition as a director. Despite the poor box office sales, Sonatine would be praised by critics and audiences alike after the original release of the film, going on to gain a small following and cult-like status around it, thanks to discussions of the film being created on the internet. In fact, I and many others attribute this random fan-made Aphex Twin music video to introducing myself and many others to Sonatine and the rest of Kitano's work. God bless PLAGU and the Philippines. Sonatine stood out to me amongst other films in the gangster genre. It provided a perfect balance between plot, dialogue, and just enough violence and action to meet with gangster movie requirements. Whilst many films in the genre focus more on action and choreographed fights, such as the various scenes in Get Out 2 or the bar fight scene from Legend, Sonatine kept it simple throughout, and had me invested from start to finish. The film opens with a panned shot of a Napoleon fish stuck to a metal spear. This image was also included as the main promotional poster for the movie. Kitano stated that the Napoleon fish used to be common in oceans along the South Japanese coast, including Okinawa, which is where a portion of the film takes place. However, the Napoleon fish has been dying out due to overfishing, the use of the fish in the poster being purely aesthetic, according to Kitano. But the imagery included, along with the title of the film, Sonatine, may have a deeper meaning to it, but more on that later. We're then introduced to the main protagonist, Murakawa, played by Takeshi Kitano, and his lieutenant, Ken, played by Susumu Terajima, as they go to collect their protection fees from a mahjong parlor owner. Murakawa is the captain, or Wakagashira, of his local Yakuza family in Tokyo. He's a rank below the boss of the family, also known as the Oyabun, so his job is to oversee the activities within the family, such as extortion, loan sharking, and illegal gambling rackets, to ensure they go smoothly. Violence, intimidation, and extortion are regular everyday things to Murakawa and the rest of the Yakuza. Upon his return to one of the family offices, he sits in stony-faced silence as one of his colleagues threatens to mutilate a man over the phone. After all, it comes with the job. However, Murakawa is growing tired of his turbulent lifestyle and is considering retiring from the Yakuza, a topic which he brings up with Ken on their way to meet the family boss at headquarters.
Ken, Yakuza 辞めたくなったな。結構荒っぽいことやってきましたからね。なんかもう疲れたよ。金持ってると嫌になっちゃうんじゃないですか。
Boss Kitajima, played by Tobo Zushi, and his personal advisor Takahashi, played by Kenichi Yojima, have called this meeting with Murakawa and Ken to discuss sending them down to end a clan war in Okinawa, which is going on between the Nakamatsu and Anan clan, both allies to Kitajima's family. Murakawa feels that something's off about this clan war already, as he's typically not the first person to pick to mediate a conflict like this, as it's often done by Takahashi due to his advisory position. After the discussion is over, it cuts to a disgruntled Murakawa sitting with Kitajima and other Yakuza officers in a hostess club. Kitajima almost receiving treatment similar to the Queen, in which nobody can smoke until he's finished eating, or drink and talk to the hostesses unless he says so. Murakawa, of course, is growing tired of this environment, where he's being ordered around by a boss he's losing loyalty to. So he and Ken decide to leave early. But before that, Murakawa beats up Takahashi in the bathroom out of anger. He knows that there's more to this clan war than they're letting on, but Murakawa has no other choice but to go into this blind. After Murakawa's violent encounter, he meets with Katagiri, played by the late Reno Sugi, as him and his foot soldiers have kidnapped the owner of the mahjong parlor, with the intention of waterboarding him as punishment for not paying his protection fees yet. Katagiri also has suspicions of the conflict and why they're being chosen to negotiate it rather than the higher-ups, completely forgetting that the parlor owner has been sitting underwater for over 3 minutes now, accidentally drowning him. Brushing it off is a simple mistake, however, and something that can be easily fixed by covering it all up. After all, it just comes with the job. The next day, suspicions of this job in Okinawa are raised when Takahashi chooses a handful of low-ranking foot soldiers and brand new recruits to accompany him to Okinawa.
Sakai desu. Yoroshiku.
奥村です。
広瀬です。
どうです。
後で俺んとこのも何人か来るから。
俺がくたばったら嬉しいだろ。
ああ、安心して便所行けるしよ。そこ並んで自己紹介しろ。
前田です。
大野です。
津田です。
冗談じゃねえ。こんなガキといけるかよ。お前ら小学校の遠足に行くんじゃねえんだぞ。
A fight suddenly breaking out after our introduction between Hirose and the new recruits after he insults them. Despite Hirose getting stabbed in the scuffle, Murakawa has a lack of concern for what's going on. He's already worked out that this job is set to fail. He's being sent to mediate a clan war, which is a field that he's inexperienced in, and on top of that, he's been given a group of unprofessional soldiers to accompany him. But he has no other choice but to go now, setting a nihilistic tone for the rest of the film. So the party arrive in Okinawa, and we're introduced to Uechi, played by Tetsu Watanabe, and Ryoji, played by Masanobu Katsumara, both members of the Nakamatsu clan, whom Murakawa's group will be aiding in this war. However, Murakawa and Katagiri's suspicions are justified due to the lack of urgency from the Nakamatsu clan members, who give the party a brief itinerary for the day, before heading to their office in a minibus, almost reminiscent of a school trip. The threatening image of the Yakuza in the minibus being juxtaposed by the offer of soft drinks and ice cream whilst they're being driven to their destination, like a group of harmless schoolchildren.
なんか飲みますか？
俺はいらねえ。腹が痛くて飲めねえ。
The group then arrive at a derelict office building owned by the Nakamatsu, but not used so frequently, so Murakawa's group can use it as a temporary base. The Anan clan are also assumed to be outside the building after a warning shot is fired at the office window before the attackers drive off, the gunshot being joked as a simple greeting to new guests. So in retaliation, Ken and Ryoji choose to drop a grenade in the Anan office. Which turns out to be a dud. Later in the evening, the group attend a dinner with the Nakamatsu clan leader, who further downplays the conflict and confirms Murakawa and Katagiru's suspicions, after explaining that the only reason for this tension between the two clans was because a member of the Nakamatsu clan had accidentally shot a member of the Anan clan, and while neither side suffered casualties, it resulted in tensions as a result of this, so this seems to be no more than a low-level scuffle between local families. It all starts to make sense now. The lack of urgency between the two Okinawa clans, sending the less skilled, easily replaceable members of the Kitajima family along to assist Murakawa. The only issue is what the motive behind this is. Whilst Murakawa stews over this, Ueji is drunkenly mocking the dancers performing at this restaurant, after which Murakawa seems to take his anger and frustration out in a bar brawl elsewhere in town, and Ryoji hassles Ken with questions about Tokyo as they wait for Murakawa to finish what he's doing. The juxtaposition between the big shot Yakuza who works in the capital and the dopey country bumpkin who clearly doesn't have a lot going on in his tiny island prefecture. So getting to know about the famous city of Tokyo is exciting news for him. The next day is when it hits the fan. The office is bombed by an unknown assailant, killing 3 of the Yakuza who are sent with Murakawa. The rest are given the option of staying or returning to Tokyo, as this will be a full-on war from here on out. Murakawa and the remainder of his party then go to a bar to mourn the losses, but are then ambushed by rival Yakuza. But there's something unique to the choreography of this gunfight, or lack thereof. You see, in most gangster films, such as Scarface, the action and the fights are constructed in such a way to create thrill, excitement, or tension. A key example being the finale fight in Scarface, where Tony Montana thrashes around his mansion, guns blazing in one last stand against Sosa's cartel. The goons he kills dramatically falling and collapsing as they're gunned down. Now take a look at Sonatine. Both parties stare directly at one another and simply just fire. They don't take cover or show any sign of worry for their well-being in this fight. Murakawa having a blank expression during the whole 15 seconds. He clearly has no care at this point for who survives, whether it's him or the assailants. He simply just aims and shoots. Whatever happens in this moment doesn't matter to him. If he is to survive this encounter, then it's just his luck. This fight in particular, whilst not realistic of course, still shows the nihilism in Kitano's character at this point. And while the lack of excitement is enough to blueball any regular gangster movie fan, it's enough to show how easily forgotten the cannon fodder can be. Who they are and why they attacked Murakawa's group is never questioned. Passive audiences could just simply assume that it was the rival family, and leave it at that. Perhaps leading to the question of how desensitized to violence both the characters and the audience are at this point. The remainder of the group decide to hide out in an old house which Ryoji's brother owns. The plan is to wait until things have died down between the Anan and the Nakamatsu, and then try to make contact with the Nakamatsu boss. Katagiri and Ueji decide to go to a nearby town to update the Tokyo headquarters on the situation and bring back supplies after for their open-ended stay. Now here is one of the most famous scenes in Sonatine, and a sort of summary of what's to come in the rest of Act 3. Whilst at this beach, the group begin to clearly regress. They're stuck in the middle of nowhere, on a beach with nothing to do and no regimental standards to uphold, so they can start to relax without the judgment. So of course, a lot of time is spent playing games with one another. Some of them have a maniacal twist, however, like Ryoji and Ken's dangerous game of tin can shooting, where instead of using a slingshot or a ball to knock the can down, they choose to use the pistols they've been supplied with. Murakawa, who's been watching the two of them play this game, decides to join in, but takes it the extra mile, choosing to play a game of Russian roulette. Ryoji and Ken's body language being a shared feeling with most first-time viewers of the movie, juxtaposing with Murakawa's pure joy in playing this game, however. It's clearly a foreshadowing of Murakawa's declining mental state at this point. Stuck on a secluded beach without anything to do or any idea of what will happen after this. This is all clearly taking a toll on him mentally. The gun chamber turns out to be empty this whole time, which could suggest a cry for help or an expression of Murakawa's frustration in not knowing what to do anymore. Later in the evening, Ueji is drunkenly re-performing the dance from the restaurant for the rest of his group, replacing the wooden clappers that the dancers use with seashells instead, picked up from the beach. This childlike use of the shells to play pretend, suggesting that they're starting to regress in this environment. They don't have to uphold any of the strict standards like they have to in their Yakuza environment. They can relax and forget about all the stresses going on right now, something they clearly haven't experienced yet, so this feeling could be very new to them. Later that night, Murakawa is woken up after having a nightmare, so he decides to take a late night walk across the beach, and perhaps process everything that's gone on so far. However, this is stopped when he comes across a man trying to assault a woman, the assaulter then confronting him, accusing him of being a pervert, which is completely ironic considering what he was just trying to do. Murakawa then shoots him. We're of course not shown any blood or gore, and the fight only lasts a couple seconds, with the man giving little resistance. No words are exchanged, and it's just dead silence after. The fight isn't glamorized at all, and Murakawa isn't portrayed as a heroic figure, or even an anti-hero, for saving this vulnerable woman. She doesn't thank him for what he's done, but just sits in silence, staring at him. Just like the bar shootout, the fight was short and had absolutely no choreography to it. It simply ends with the assaulter being shot in the stomach, from what we can assume, as the altercation was filmed in a medium close-up shot, only showing their upper bodies, this eliminating any form of excitement or thrill for Murakawa's victory. The man is simply just buried and never mentioned again in the rest of the film, just like all the other victims in Sonatine. Murakawa telling the rest of the group that the woman had shot the assaulter clearly shows that he doesn't want to take credit for his murder, suggesting that all of the killing so far has been weighing on his mind already, now that he has time to think about it. So not being held accountable for another killing may comfort him more. The next morning, another member of the Nakamatsu clan comes to visit the group at the beach house to give them an update on the current situation. After the update is given, more games ensue, as the group, now joined by Miyuki, played by Aya Kokamai, recreate a paper wrestling game on the beach. And no, I haven't edited the scene at all. For some reason, they chose to speed up the footage in post-production. Whether it was for comical effect, I'm not sure. Miyuki, now being taken in by the group as a fellow friend, and asking if she can visit more often, perhaps as either a way of showing her gratitude for being saved the night before, a sense of Stockholm Syndrome, considering how dangerous they are, or perhaps a want to join in on their escapism. The group are now also using the dead man's car to make trips out to the beach house to either get supplies, make calls with the Tokyo office out of town, or in the case of Murakawa, to drop Miyuki home. On their way home, Miyuki asks Murakawa about his first ever kill.
初めて人殺したのっていつ？
高校の時だよ。
誰を？
俺の親父。
なんで？
やらしてくれなかったから。
Whether his reason for killing him was true or not, Miyuki doesn't show any sign of shock or discomfort from this. She could have grown up around violence herself, or has perhaps become completely desensitized to it from the night before, showing that whilst she's a civilian, she's being involuntarily dragged into the nihilistic and desensitized mindset to violence. Murakawa and Ueji play a prank on the others by planting sandpit traps on the beach and tricking them into falling in. Katagiri, still being uptight, confronts Murakawa, asking him if these games and pranks are too childish, considering the authoritative position he should be upholding. There's nothing else to do on this beach, however. They have to wait for orders from headquarters on what to do next, and the length of time they'll be spending here is unforeseen. So they'd be better off relaxing whilst they can, as chances are they'll never be able to let go like this ever again. The group are now running low on water the next day, having to reserve most of it for drinking water. They have to wait for it to rain if anybody wants to have a bath or shower. Meanwhile, Miyuki and Murakawa are out fishing together. The others suspect that she might have feelings for him, which could be a clear indication of Stockholm Syndrome, considering they only met just 2 days ago. She continues to admire Murakawa's lack of fear or second thought when it comes to killing people. Murakawa clearly doesn't take pride in this, arguing that tough men don't carry guns. He only does because he's scared. His nihilism shining through again when he alludes to rather being dead than scared all the time. Back at the beach house, Katagiri and Ueji discuss what the plan is now, suggesting that Katagiri has taken the authoritative role in the absence of Murakawa. This adult discussion is juxtaposed from across the living room by Ken and Ryoji playing around with an action figure like children. They're careful what headquarters has to say or lack thereof, not crossing their minds at all. And then it rains. For about 1 minute and 40 seconds.
雨やんじゃったじゃねえかよバカ野郎。どうすんだよ。
The dance is performed again later that night, with Ueji directing Ken and Ryoji on how to perform it, this time with DIY costumes consisting of a red tablecloth dress and a wicker basket hat, reinforcing the element of childlike play between the group. Katagiri tries contacting Takahashi again at headquarters, to no response. The officer on the phone line giving the same excuse of him being out each time. Whether he's deliberately avoiding the phone calls to keep Murakawa and the others at the beach house or not, we're not sure of. After putting the phone down, the normally cool-headed Katagiri takes his anger out on a shop attendant, perhaps feeling emasculated by having to keep asking headquarters what to do next. So threatening the shop attendant perhaps establishes his tough Yakuza image for him. We're then introduced to a mysterious man standing outside the empty beach house. Whether he's a spy for the Anan or an undercover police officer, we're not sure of yet, but he's potentially been watching Murakawa and the others for some time now. The group play one final game together, which is a little more dangerous than the last few games, as it involves shooting fireworks at one another, but there is some safety and protection, in the form of face coverings, shields, and wall covers. This is the only choreographed action sequence, if you could consider it that, in comparison to the bar shootout from before. They rush behind cover and duck over shields to shoot fireworks at one another, like guns, except for Murakawa, who is either firing blanks or trying to deliberately miss with his pistol. The fact this game is choreographed and none of the fight scenes could perhaps be mocking the traditional choreography of action and fight scenes, perhaps connoting that when choreographed in a movie, it's almost like they're playing a game of pretend, except with a little bit more visual violence and expensive special effects. Additionally, the use of fireworks like guns foreshadows what could happen once they leave the beach house. The next morning, Ueji receives an update that the Nakamatsu boss would like to meet with Murakawa to discuss the truce with the Anan clan. Murakawa is absent from his responsibilities again, as he's chosen to go down to the beach. Katagiri chooses to go in his place instead. They meet boss Nakamatsu outside of his estate, and his tone is grim.
お宅の組の高橋ってのがやってきてな。穴組と手打ちに持ち込みたいって言うんだ。
そりゃ良かったですね。
で、その穴組が言うには手打ちの条件としてうちの組解散しろって。どうするんですか。俺はそんなことはできねえ。最後までやるって言って返した。だけど植地どうかな。 後の組はおめえに任せるからおめえの勝手にやってくれねえか。こいつにも子供ができたことだし俺も年だし解散しようとドンパチやろうとお前の勝手にやってくれ。
俺たちには何か言ってましたか？
浦川さんとこはとりあえず破門という形にするらしい。
Whilst Boss Nakamatsu is reluctant to do this, he almost feels threatened into having to dissolve his clan for the safety of his wife and child. So he offers Ueji the leadership role of the Nakamatsu clan instead, with the option to dissolve the organization or refuse the truce and continue this war. The banishment of Murakawa and his group establishes once and for all that Boss Kitajima and Takahashi had other intentions for sending Murakawa down to Okinawa. Boss Nakamatsu and his bodyguards are executed by who we can assume is the strange man, who's most likely a hitman working for Takahashi, being paid to wipe out any threat to Boss Kitajima's power, including Murakawa. Whilst he walks to his next target, he for some reason tosses a pile of what I'm guessing is red camellias, based on what I had been researching to get a better idea of this, as the red camellia is apparently meant to symbolize the honorable death of a warrior or samurai in ancient Japanese culture. Perhaps it's simply a ritual that this hitman takes part in after each job is complete, or simply a way to mock the killing, as being executed doesn't really feel like an honourable way to go. The others are still playing on the beach and pay little attention to the hitman approaching behind them, but it's too late at this point, as Ken gets shot. Ryoji, being the young, inexperienced Yakuza that he is, who's never been in a gunfight before, runs away in fear, and Murakawa and Miyuki just freeze up, not knowing what to do. Murakawa has just lost one of his closest friends, and is physically unable to avenge him right now. The hitman clearly not noticing the two of them behind the boat, leaving the scene before anybody else is able to see him. Murakawa's peaceful sanctuary at this beach has now been ruined by the re-entry of his violent world and lifestyle, perhaps a wake-up call for him, at the cost of Ken's life. Now that Murakawa has snapped out of his happy oblivion, he ends up throwing a frisbee around on the beach one last time before they head off to find Takahashi, everyone else watching him from afar. Ryoji showing a sense of guilt and shame in his body language for not being able to do anything to save Ken, whilst Katagiri is glad that Murakawa has returned to his responsibilities. He's clearly dismayed that Murakawa has nothing to lose at this point, with the intention of getting revenge on Boss Kitajima and Takahashi. So Murakawa, Ueji, and Katagiri go to a hotel in Okinawa, where Takahashi is supposedly staying in, to kidnap him and get the whereabouts of Boss Kitajima. There's complete silence between the three men as they go to approach his assumed hotel room, to find out that it was the wrong Takahashi, a light-hearted joke of an innocent man almost getting caught up in a fight with Yakuza because he was mistaken for another person. In a tense moment like this for the three men, it's just simply chance that they meet both Takahashi and the hitman in the elevator on the way down in the hotel. They're clearly unaware of them being there until Murakawa confronts them, leading to a gunfight in the elevator with civilians in the crossfire. Ueji and Katagiri are killed in the action, and the hitman is finished off. What's bizarre about this scene, however, is that the civilians stuck in this elevator show absolutely no emotion to what's going on in front of them. Perhaps they're meant to symbolize the audience and us as onlookers, with us blankly staring at the screen, just like the blank stares they're giving to Murakawa. With nowhere left to run, Takahashi is marched out of the hotel room and into the back of a car, Murakawa taking him to a secluded area to interrogate him.
本当に俺は知らねえんだよ。親分はな、花組と一仕事やりたがってたんだよ。それにゃ仲松の野郎邪魔だろ。兄弟分だからな。で、今度の揉め事きっかけにして穴組と組んで長松んとこ潰しにかかったんで。で、俺の波紋はどうなってんだよ。 お前んとこ景気いいし欲しくなったんだろ。
Boss Kitashima and Takahashi's plans all make sense now. They chose to use this clan war in Okinawa to eliminate the Nakamatsu and Murakawa in order to have a hold on more land and power without any potential competition to Kitashima's leadership. Now that Takahashi has given away all of this information though, like the weasel he is, he tries to offer Nakamatsu's land in return for sparing him, and Kitashima. But of course, Murakawa doesn't want this, or trust that they won't make an attempt on his life if he were to give up now. He wants to avenge the lives of all the men he lost during this conflict, and for sending him down to Okinawa with the intention of getting rid of him. Instead of finishing off Takahashi himself, he offers Ryoji the opportunity to, so he chooses to kill him with a grenade. The use of the grenade, and it actually detonating this time, compared to the dud used at the Anan office, symbolizing Ryoji's change into a fully fledged Yakuza, no longer a low-rung country bumpkin. Remember what I said in the beginning of this video about the Napoleon fish? Well, I think now is the perfect time to explain it. In 1991, the Japanese parliament announced a change to the organized crime countermeasures law, classifying most Yakuza groups as Boryokuden, or violence groups, which legally classified many of them as criminal organizations, meaning that the police had an easier time securing arrest warrants for Yakuza Oyabuns and foot soldiers. Then followed up by the anti-Boryokuden law in 1992, which resulted in the dissolution of 192 Yakuza families that year alone. And in the years following, recruitment numbers started to dwindle and conviction rates escalated, leading to the Yakuza to become an endangered group. This fits in with the symbolization of the dead Napoleon fish in the opening scene of Sonatine. Just like the Napoleon fish, the Yakuza have been progressively dying out in Japan, leading to many clans and families struggling for survival. This pairs up with the title of the film, Sonatine. Sonatine comes from the musical term sonatina, which is when someone learning the piano has to choose what genre of music they wish to learn from there on, as having to learn multiple sonatinas of varying genres can be difficult, meaning that the student has to be wise in their decision making, as they'll have to continue learning that genre. You could argue that Murakawa has chosen his sonatina, the genre being the life of a Yakuza. He's a part of a dying breed being gradually pressured by the authorities and Yakuza family infighting. He can't live in blissful ignorance like his time at the beach house. He has to face his decisions and live up to the standards of a Yakuza. Now let's get back to where we left off. Whilst Ryoji is scouting out the building that Kitashima will be meeting Boss Anan in, Murakawa and Miyuki spend one last time together. Not that Miyuki knows it will be. She has a try at firing the M16, but clearly shows that she's unable to control the recoil of the weapon, perhaps alluding to her not being destined for a violent life due to her lack of experience in handling a firearm. Murakawa and Ryoji then leave her behind at the beach house, unsure if they'll ever come back. High-ranking Yakuza of all stripes start entering the conference building, bosses Kitashima and Anan included. A back-and-forth cutback of Murakawa and Ryoji in the car, and Miyuki alone on the beach with a slowly dying firework in hand as it slowly peters out, could symbolize Miyuki's slow realization that Murakawa isn't going to be coming back. Ryoji rigged the lights to go out in the building when he was scouting it earlier in the day, giving Murakawa the opportunity to strike. As he approaches the building, the song Act of Violence by Studio Ghibli composer Joe Hisaishi begins to play, creating a build-up to the fight. We're shown most of this fight from an outsider's perspective, with various cuts to the inside of the building interjected as well. We're yet again absent from most of this conflict, leading the viewer to have to fill in the gaps with their imagination. There's clear connotations that maybe this is something we don't deserve to see, as most of us aren't a part of this violent lifestyle, and it'd be better for us to stay away from it whilst we can. Ryoji's expression perhaps being shared with many members of the audience, as he can do nothing but watch. He's not a part of this altercation either, so he's just left helpless in this situation, ending up doing what most normal people would do and running from the danger, unsure of if Murakawa will survive or not. Miyuki is waiting outside of the beach house for him, expecting him to return. But Murakawa, who survived the fight, clearly has no intention to. He may not want to be around Miyuki, as he may feel that he's a bad influence on her, desensitizing her to violence and murder, clearly not wanting her to follow on his path of hurt, where friends are lost to violence, and you constantly fear if you'll be next. So he chooses to take his own life. The heroic music immediately cutting short, and there's nothing but silence, except for the sea breeze. Sonatine stands out from its contemporaries due to not following the traditional gangster tropes. It wasn't a rags to riches story like Goodfellas or Scarface. It just showed a man who was already at the top and wanted out as he grew tired of it, showing that instead of a life of thrill, it's simply a life full of violence and paranoia at every turn. Perhaps this subversion of the gangster movie stereotypes is what may have caused the film to bomb in the box office. But it clearly meant something to the likes of critics such as Roger Ebert and directors like Quentin Tarantino. Appreciation for the film would also gradually snowball over the years, thanks to the introduction of the internet and streaming services, generating interest in Takeshi Kitano and his work leading back to the pivotal video, which began my interest in Sonatine. If you're interested in watching Sonatine for yourself, it's available on Amazon Prime, Curzon, and Apple TV. There are, of course, other unorthodox ways to watch it, which I do not endorse, so do it at your own risk. Thank you all again for watching, and thank you all to my subscribers who've been patiently waiting for this video. It's been a very long time coming. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye for now.
平気で人撃っちゃうのすごいよね。平気で人殺しちゃうってことは平気で死ねるってことだよね。
よかったら拳銃なんか持ってねえ。
でも平気で撃っちゃう。
怖いから撃っちゃうんだよ。
でも死ぬの怖くないでしょ。
あんまり死ぬの怖がるとな、死にたくなっちゃうんだよ。